Hey, what's going on? My name's Marta from Ignition Off-Road, and in this video we're going to finally lift my XT Forester. Stay tuned for more. So the time has finally come to lift my XT Forester. So let's give you a rundown of what I'm going to do in terms of the lift kit. So again, I've gone with a Subi Oz lift kit. I've run Subi Oz lift kits for years. This is actually my fourth lift kit from Subi Oz, and I've never had any dramas with them. Now, in saying that, all my previous lift kits were brand new when I purchased them. This one I've purchased now is a second-hand lift kit. I actually purchased from a friend. He runs a YouTube channel called Adventure Hunters Oz. I'll leave a link to his channel up above and in the description below. But anyway, here is the lift kit I've purchased. So what I've done is I've got a second-hand Subi Oz lift kit. For the front, I've got 2-inch spacers, and for the rear, I've got 2.5-inch spacers. So how does the second-hand Subi Oz lift kit look after a little bit of abuse? So I'm not sure how many kilometers it's actually had off-road, but looking at this, it's still in really good condition. There's one or two bits where the powder coat has started to flake off a little bit, and you can see a tiny bit of rust underneath. But other than that, the lift has held up really good. There's definitely no cracking or anything that'll affect it structurally. Now, what I've done to complement the rear of the vehicle is I've actually purchased some white line adjustable lateral links as well. Now, this is a full set, fully adjustable, and the reason I've got these is going to eliminate the need for a camber bolt at the rear to get the alignment right. So the adjustable arms are brilliant because you can again set everything back to the factory specifications. It means you can get your track width the way it is naturally. It means you can move that strut tower back off the fender a little bit as well, which is brilliant. And full adjustability, which means I've got a lot more control over the adjustment in the rear, and hence why I've gone for these. So if you want to check them out, I'll leave a link for that in the description below. But for now, let's jump into the installation of the Subi Oz lift kit onto my XT Forester. You! As per usual, the first thing I'm going to do is to jack up the car and secure it on the jack stands. With the wheels removed, the first thing I'm going to do is focus on fitting the rear lateral links. To start with, I disconnect the sway bar, followed by the lateral links from the hub. The inner section requires more parts removed for access, so the exhaust comes off and I pull the drive shaft out of the diff to allow further access. Putting the links side by side, it's notable how much larger the links are. However, I also noticed that the brackets for the end links were different. It turns out I was recommended the wrong part number, but I will still be able to make this work using the end links from an earlier model Forester. Unfortunately, it was at this part of the install that the weather caught me out, and I had to hold off the install for a few days. Alright, so we finally have a break in the weather. I've managed to put the rear lateral links in. As you can see, they are finally installed, which is fantastic. A bit beefier. They'll give me a lot more adjustment in the rear alignment specs, which will be really good. One thing I have done for the brackets for the end links, these ones here, normally they sit down underneath on an SF Forester, whereas on this case I've flipped them upright. Until I figure out how to, until I get some end links. I think I might just remove that rear sway bar for now. That way that gives me a little bit more clearance as well, which will be good. So the next thing I want to do is to start installing the lift kit now that those lateral links are done. I'm going to start with the lift kit at the rear. I need to disconnect the brake line from the strut. A long punch and a hammer work great for popping at the clip that holds the brake line in place. Next, I'm removing the 2 lower bolts and then making my way to the interior to access the top of the strut. With the strut now free, I can now remove it and will focus on the trailing arm brackets next. I realised at this point that there was a bit of pressure on the drive shaft, so I used the spare tyre as a bit of a support. I'm fitting the trailing arm spacers without the strut in position, as this allows for more movement and it makes it easier to position the trailing arms. Moving on to the struts, I'm going to be replacing the factory self-leveling struts with the heavy-duty Kingspring setup from my previous Forester. One thing you will notice on the Kingsprings is the wear marks, and that is actually from the springs rubbing on the body of the Forester. But thanks to the adjustable lateral links, I can space these out to avoid further rubbing on the new setup. When fitting the strut top spacers, a trick I like to do is to wedge a long screwdriver between the strut top studs to hold the strut in place while I tighten the bolts. With the strut assembled, it can now be fitted back onto the vehicle, and I can move on to the other side to repeat the process. With the rear assembled, it's time to move to the front, and I'll start by removing the factory skid plate. While I was there, I noticed a pool of green liquid under the car. Unfortunately, this looks like my radiator is leaking and it will need to be replaced. This will be a job for another time, but for now I'll be disconnecting the brake line and ABS lines and make a start disconnecting the strut from the hub. With the strut top nuts removed, the strut can now be pulled out and the strut top spacers fitted. When refitting the struts, take note of the camber bolt position. You'll notice the 10 stamped on the bolt, and I like to shift this clockwise 45 degrees from a vertical position, which essentially gives maximum camber. This should provide even camber and restore close to factory specs until you get a proper alignment. Securing the strut top nuts. I use an impact gun initially and finish off by hand, as these bolts are easy to snap. Ideally you should use a torque wrench for this step. Also make sure to note the position of the spacer, as there are an L and an R markings which indicate left and right, with an arrow pointing inwards for the correct fitment. The last thing I want to do is replace the plastic skid plate with my street sign alternative. As my skid plate was built for the 4-inch lift, the rear mounting holes have to be adjusted to fit the standard mounting holes. While the modification process isn't very pretty, it's a process of trial and error, and it's a piece of metal from the junkyard after all. As long as it protects the engine, I don't really care what it looks like. With the lift now installed, the muffler still needs to be put back on, and I'm going to drive the vehicle back and forth a few times to let the suspension settle. It's also a good excuse to hear the fuzz with an axleback exhaust delete, so enjoy. Before I jump into the reveal, I just want to touch on the adjustable lateral links. After I got my alignment done by a professional, I found my rear drive shaft kept popping out of place. This is because I've basically lengthened my lateral links with the adjustable factor. While some have used the links without any issues, it looks like I'll either need to search for longer drive shafts or go back to the factory setup with a camber bolt. But hey, that's why I'm trying to do this stuff, so you guys know what works and what doesn't. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Check out my Fanbeach account, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Enjoy the lift reveal.